The small colony near Narsingpur Road recently became the center of a series of inexplicable disappearances, with residents vanishing from their homes without leaving a single trace. Police reports highlighted a chilling consistency in the security footage. At exactly 2:17 a.m., a lone pedestrian stops dead in his tracks, turns his head toward the darkness, and the camera feed cuts to static. Raghav, a crime journalist who built his career on rational, evidence-based reporting, arrived to investigate. He viewed the case as a puzzle to be solved through logic, a sequence of human actions that simply hadn't been decoded yet. Standard forensic logic relies on a visible perpetrator and a physical weapon. But when the attacker is invisible to the camera and the victims leave no struggle behind, traditional investigative methods reach a dead end. Local residents pointed to a darker origin story. Shakila Appa, a woman who had seen the aftermath firsthand, identified the killer as a Dedh Phutiya, a half-dead jinn standing 18 inches tall with a scorched face and eyes missing their pupils. The entity hunts by mimicking the voices of the vulnerable or the beloved. It calls out from the shadows in the tone of a lost child or a family member, luring the target to pause and listen. This schematic illustrates the entity's hunting constraint. If the target maintains forward momentum, sound waves from the rear remain harmless. The trap springs when the target rotates their head. Turning around acts as a biological key, breaking natural defenses and granting the creature permission to attack. The entity weaponizes human empathy, turning the natural instinct to help a crying child into the precise mechanical trigger for a fatal ambush. Determined to debunk the local folklore, Raghav walked out into the empty streets at 2 a.m. He purposely sought out the silers, waiting for the phenomenon to challenge his skepticism. When a child's voice pleaded for help from the darkness, Raghav yielded to his curiosity and looked over his shoulder. The creature lunged with terrifying speed, but Raghav managed to strike it with a heavy iron key from his pocket. The metal scorched the entity, forcing it to shriek and vanish back into the shadows. Despite driving the creature away, Raghav felt a sudden, hollow chill. He looked down to find that while he had saved his life, the jinn had successfully severed and consumed his physical shadow, leaving his body an empty vessel. The Dedh Phutiya uses the stolen shadow to anchor itself to a new host. By consuming this essence, it begins hollowing out the victim's identity to make room for its own consciousness. The investigation soon revealed a mundane criminal conspiracy behind the haunting. A local real estate developer had hired a tantric to summon the entity, specifically targeting this neighborhood. Their goal was to use the missing persons epidemic to crash local property values, allowing the builder to acquire the land for a fraction of its worth once the terrified residents fled. As the property deal progressed, Raghav's condition worsened. He experienced intense sleep paralysis, the crushing sensation of a heavy weight on his chest, and a persistent smell of cemetery soil that no amount of scrubbing could remove. His transformation became undeniable during a moment of panic in front of his bathroom mirror. When he shattered the glass, the jagged shards reflected the burned, pupilless face of the jinn that now stared back from within his own skin. Corporate greed provided the opening for an ancient horror, proving that human corruption can effectively engineer a supernatural disaster. With the jinn now controlling his motor functions, Raghav tracked the conspirators to an abandoned leather factory. His body had become a cage, housing both his fading consciousness and the entity's growing power. Ancient lore dictates that jinns are composed of smokeless fire, meaning they do not possess a physical heart or brain that can be stopped by conventional means. To destroy the parasite, one must destroy the elemental source it feeds on. Raghav used his final moments of lucidity to wrap heavy iron chains around his limbs. He was binding his own body to the machinery, ensuring the jinn could not leap to a new host when the fire started. He ignited the factory's chemical stores, choosing to incinerate himself along with the builder and the tantric. The explosion reduced the factory and everyone inside to a pile of ash. Because the jinn integrates itself into the host's very cells, like smoke in fabric, there is no way to excise it without destroying the material itself. Total incineration was the only method left to ensure the entity died with its vessel. Investigators eventually attributed the factory explosion to a pressurized gas leak, officially closing the book on the disappearances in Narsingpur. However, by killing the tantric, Raga inadvertently broke the ritual binding that confined the entity to a specific location. The creature was no longer a tool of a master. It was now a free agent. Months later, new security footage captured a lone guard on patrol, followed by a small, child-sized shadow that moved with its own malicious intent, completely independent of the man's footsteps. The Dedh Phutiya is now untethered, wandering for its next home. Turning your head toward a voice in the dark provides this predator with the formal invitation it needs to claim its next shadow.